So the first tool that I, as a DevOps engineer, use on a day-to-day basis pretty much is Nix, and especially Home Manager. So jumping between many sort of devices, between different laptops, computers, I like to have my setup to be the same, and Home Manager allows me to do it really quickly and really easily. So what Home Manager is a way for you to declaratively set up your sort of home file, home directory, any sort of dot files, and install it directly into your system, and actually store all those packages in the Nix store rather than installing them directly to like your usual location, which is the local bin. So it's a great way for me to manage all the sort of packages I need to have installed for Neovim, and just running any sort of like programming languages that I need to have. So let's jump over to the terminal. I'll show you guys what it looks like. So if I head over to my config, home manager, this is my main home Nix file where I declare all my packages, everything that I need, and my two kind of main files that I like to copy over is my Neovim config and my ZSHRC. You can add more files like your setup for tmux, any sort of key maps that you have there, K9s, or anything that you essentially just need to have copied over between different systems. So this is my first sort of tool that I can't live without at the moment, especially working as a consultant at the moment. I jump between different laptops quite often, so this is a great way for me to have my setup the way I like it all the time. The second tool I can't live without right at the moment is Neovim. So I used to be a devoted visual VS Code sort of editor person. I kind of jump between different sort of JetBrains offerings as well when I was working on PHP or Golang for Go. So, but I jumped over to Neovim because I do enjoy the terminal experience a lot more, and I used to always do a lot of things in the terminal, and there used to be that kind of big separation for me between my editor and the terminal that I just did different things. Even though VS Code and all the other editors do have that integrated terminal, I still chose to go to the just usual native app for like the terminal or iTerm or something like that. So let me show you my VS Code, for example. Sorry, my Neovim. So I'm using LazyVim, which installs a lot of things for me. I do have like nice sort of sidebar, which I tend to use a little bit for creating files and sort of like looking at sort of structures of any sort of directories that I need, especially if it's a new project and I'm just jumping into it. I still kind of need to have a look over like sort of what the structure is. I do tend to turn it off when I'm editing sort of actual files. So if I look at my sort of just very simple Terraform module here, I just use that, and this is all I need. It looks exactly like my VS Code did. It's actually a lot leaner, a lot faster as well, and I'm able to search files quite easily with LazyVim. Adds a lot of stuff like Telescope. It does have Search Grip. Oh, I don't have Grip installed on this machine actually, but yeah, it allows me to search everything quite easily, and it works just the same as VS Code, and it's a lot cleaner, a lot simpler, and I can just create new panes, new tabs, and just stay in the terminal pretty much 75% of the time. I'm working on some sort of coding thing, jumping between servers. So Neovim is another thing at the moment as a DevOps engineer I can't live without. One of the main things as a DevOps engineer that you just can't get away from is YAML. YAML's everywhere, whether you're looking at Terraform, not Terraform, Kubernetes, parts of Terraform you can specify in YAML as well. GitHub Actions or CICD pipelines, it's everywhere. You cannot get away from it. When you're a DevOps engineer, you're essentially a part-time YAML engineer as well. So this just has to have an honorable mention here as well. You cannot get away from YAML. So just the kind of basic understanding of YAML. You don't need to be an expert in like how to structure things. You just need to know the basics. It's a very simple sort of thing. I reckon you can learn it within an hour to be completely prepared for just seeing the syntax and how it actually is structured. So you do need to learn YAML still. You're not getting away from YAML. You still need it, and it's a big part of the DevOps world. One of the main tools to keep learning in 2025 is still Terraform. No matter with all the new sort of offerings like OpenTifu, Pulumi, and a bunch of others like CloudFormation, Bicep, and stuff like that, you still want to learn Terraform. I reckon most of the infrastructure as code for most companies is still going to stay in Terraform, and it's not going to move to other sort of providers. I know there's been a lot of controversy over the last year with the whole licensing thing. However, it's just too much effort to kind of bring your whole infrastructure, especially if you're like a big sort of organization and 95% of your infrastructure is in Terraform. You do not want to move away from that just because of a licensing deal. Most companies will bite the bullet and actually pay for those licenses. I know for open source and most smaller companies, it might not be as big of a deal to kind of move away from Terraform to a different sort of offering like Pulumi. However, I reckon if you want to be a DevOps engineer in 2025, you still need to learn Terraform, especially sort of best practices with stacks just being announced in the beginning of November, end of October, and actually being still in an alpha stage. It's gonna get a lot more intensive, especially Terraform Cloud. There's gonna be a lot more that you need to learn. So Terraform is another tool that you're gonna need to keep learning to get a job as a DevOps engineer, cloud engineer in 2025. One of the main aspects I think that gets overlooked a lot by companies and engineers is actually monitoring your applications and monitoring your stack. For me, the monitoring tools I like to go to are Prometheus and Grafana. Grafana for the dashboards, Prometheus for the agent, especially working with Kubernetes a lot. It works really great. It gets a lot of the metrics that you need, is able to capture all the logs, and it's technically open source, so you can see all the documentation and all the codes. You can contribute to those, and they're great projects to actually try and contribute as well. A lot of people overlook observability as a kind of big aspect of, like, when you're setting up an application, you always start thinking about, right, what do I need? I need my EKS cluster. I need all these servers spun up. I need that VPC. You forget about monitoring, and then a lot of errors can happen. You don't know where to look. You don't know where to find them. So when you're actually designing sort of new infrastructure and new sort of applications, considering monitoring and setting that up is a big aspect. So if you learn these kind of two and you have a good understanding of how to set up Prometheus, how to export stuff to Grafana and set up dashboards, I think that's going to set you on like a really good trajectory as well and a good path in 2025. So I would strongly recommend focusing on these two as well. So CICD is an important part of any sort of DevOps team, and it's just the DevOps lifecycle. You can't get away from it. And in terms of automation, I think it's one of the best things you can do for your company relatively quickly and for your projects in general to make it a lot better. For this, I don't have a specific tool. I just love GitHub Actions. We use GitHub in my work, GitLab as well for GitLab sort of pipelines, and Jenkins. Jenkins is the kind of OG CI/CD sort of tool. I think there's probably been other ones before, but I think when you think of CI/CD, you think Jenkins. So if you want to be able to kind of jump into any sort of workplaces, I think learning GitHub Actions and learning Jenkins, just the kind of general sort of like setup that you need, I think these two will set you for a great path in 2025 as a DevOps engineer. So I don't think CI/CD is going anywhere. I know I mentioned GitOps and the GitOps approach being there. I think those two will coexist very nicely together. One's not going to overtake the other. I think that's what I'm trying to say here. So you want to learn, definitely Jenkins, writing sort of declarative pipelines and making sure you know how to do it in a declarative way with YAML instead of, just this sort of click up sort of way. So if you want to learn these two, I think that's going to set you on like a good trajectory on your career path. So Jenkins and GitHub Actions for CI/CD. Another great tool to learn in 2025 is still Ansible. Ansible is a way where you can configure and automate a lot of the provisioning of your servers. a lot of stuff you can set up with, for example, if you've got cluster, you tend not to use Ansible as much, but for any sort of like kind of more traditional workloads like your EC2s and just your virtual machines and your servers, you can still use Ansible, and it's a great way for you to kind of configure everything. I think this is slightly gone away, but a lot of workplaces and a lot of jobs still ask for you to know Ansible. So to kind of have like a general understanding of it and be able to set things up, create playbooks and actually run them and execute them, I think that's going to put you in really good standing as well if you're looking for a job in 2025. So I think this is probably like an aspect that you don't want to put all your time into, but definitely dedicate some time into learning Ansible as well. Another tool that has been around for a while, and it's looking at the sort of ArgoCD and GitOps especially. There is Flux, but I think ArgoCD, for me, it has this slight edge when it comes to the GitOps sort of approaches. I quite like the UI and the CLI that ArgoCD offers, and it's just for me a lot easier to visualize things and understand things. I probably haven't given a Flux enough of a chance to be like, oh yeah, completely right of Flux. You can definitely, if you're between the two, and there's very good reasons why you can jump between them. If someone knows, please leave them in the comments. But for me, another tool in 2025 that you want to learn is ArgoCD. I think GitOps, especially with the rise of Kubernetes, a lot more workloads are being hosted on Kubernetes. I'm not saying that Kubernetes has been around for it's going to be 11 years in 2025. A lot more deployments are going to go the GitOps sort of way. CICD is great for deploying stuff. However, when you have a lot of microservices and you need to track things, be able to do blue-green deployments, rollbacks, a lot easier in Kubernetes clusters. I think ArgoCD is the way to go for me, and the GitOps approach. CICD is going to stick around for, integration testing and some continuous delivery. However, I think for those kind of microservices, I think ArgoCD is going to be the way. So if you want to get ahead in your sort of DevOps journey in 2025, I think learning ArgoCD is not going to hurt you. A lot of jobs aren't going to have it at the beginning. However, I feel like as the sort of time goes on over the next year or two, I think you're going to see a lot more jobs with ArgoCD being required as one of the things. Another tool you want to learn in 2025 is Helm. Especially, I'm sticking around the sort of Kubernetes and cloud native sort of approach. Helm for me compared to Kustomize just has the leg up, and I reckon a lot more companies are using Helm in comparison to Kustomize or other offerings. If you want to be like a DevOps engineer that can code and create packages and create Helm charts, this is the way to go. So when you want to package like your offerings quite like Kubernetes packages quite well and Kubernetes microservices, you want to learn how to make charts that are necessary. You want to learn how to deploy things with the Helm charts into your Kubernetes clusters. And I think between the comparison between the Helm and Kustomize, for me, Helm is just the easier sort of tool to learn, and it's way more beneficial in terms of like career perspective. A lot of companies at the moment are still looking for people that do know Helm, do know how to make Helm charts. So I think if you want to be well prepared for a DevOps role in 2025, Helm is a must. And from a programming language perspective, Golang, I think, is going to be the kind of main DevOps language, which it has been the main sort of DevOps language for the last, I would say, year or two, definitely. Python has always been around for scripting and creating sort of packages for DevOps. I think Golang has been taken over, especially most of the tools that you guys kind of would use now, like Kubernetes. I don't know, Helm, I think, has also been written in Go. Sort of all those offerings have been written in Go, and it's a great sort of programming language for DevOps because you can compile it very easily and run it everywhere. So especially for tooling, if you need to create some tooling or for other developers or people in your team, I think Golang's the way to go. So if you want to get like a leg up to be like one of those DevOps engineers who can still code, I think looking at a Golang course for 2025 is the way to go as well. So yeah, listen, there's a lot of discussions in terms of Python, Rust. You're also going to need bash script, and bash scripting is not going to go away. I've been in a lot of places, a lot of workplaces still use bash, and it's great for sort of like spinning up things really fast. But I think if you want to have that kind of leg up on other people, when you can be like a DevOps engineer that can program really well, I think Golang is going to be the way to go for next year. Okay, I mentioned ArgoCD earlier, and I mentioned a lot of workloads are moving to Kubernetes for the kind of scalability and, especially the kind of, clustering everything together and having everything in one place rather than distributed among sort of many devices. I think you're going to see a lot more Kubernetes being used, especially I think in the AI space. AI space is going to benefit from Kubernetes in a lot of ways over the next couple of years, and you're going to see a lot more sort of AI sort of startups and AI places actually asking for DevOps engineers that know Kubernetes and can kind of set up a kind of AI ML ops sort of thing. So if you want to learn Kubernetes, I do have a very quick course which you're going to see just a little title, a little card just above here to click on. It's less than an hour. It gives you the kind of just overview of Kubernetes and the kind of basics, how to troubleshoot things, how to spin up things just from a declarative perspective and just from basic commands, and how to set up your own sort of Minikube cluster. Kubernetes is going to be around for a long time, and it's going to be used way more often in the next few years, especially in 2025. So if you need a job and you want a job in DevOps or the cloud, Kubernetes is the way to go. And when it comes to cloud providers, I think AWS for me takes it as the kind of main cloud provider you want to learn. I think most of the jobs, I've seen like a survey somewhere on LinkedIn or maybe elsewhere saying that essentially most of the jobs for cloud engineers, DevOps engineers are with AWS. Don't get me wrong, Google Clouds, OCI and Azure, you do need to know parts of it. You sometimes are going to encounter them. A lot of companies do use Azure for Active Directories and a lot of like sort of kind of on-premise connections and the working like that. So kind of again, those parts of the sort of Active Directory and those kind of like on-premise parts of Azure and being able to connect them to AWS, I think when you learn those, you're going to be in great standings to land a job in 2025. But when it comes to learning these sort of products and offerings from a cloud provider, I think you want to focus on AWS for 2025. I think it's one of the best cloud providers there is. Even for your kind of own sort of testing, it's easy to learn. It's relatively cheaper than all the other ones. You do get a good free tier that you're able to kind of just pick up and learn, create a bunch of services, create a bunch of networks, set up your clusters. It's a great way to learn. And I think if you want to kind of have a leg up on other people, you want to get into the certifications as well. The certifications are great. If you want to go for the cloud practitioner or the sort of solutions architect, that's the kind of main two that I would recommend going for if you're just starting off as a DevOps role. These two are going to set you on a good path to kind of land your first job in 2025 as a DevOps engineer. Or if you want to get like a promotion, or if you want to pivot from being a software engineer or backend engineer into a more DevOps role, AWS and learning all of these offerings and kind of like the main products that it has, I think is the right way for you to go in 2025.